Let's talk about the solar eclipse in Libra happening on October 2nd and making magic. We just had the lunar eclipse in Pisces, and there was this sense of illusions versus reality. And our reality may very well have been shaken up because, of course, this Pisces eclipse was a full moon. That is a time of letting go and having these big realizations that can help us move forward in a more empowered way. So, with the Pisces eclipse, our reality may have been shaken up. It's this moment where some things are clarifying and other things are falling away. But right now, we are in the midst of eclipse season. And the dust hasn't cleared yet, so we're having to lean into our sense of faith, even when it's something as basic as faith in putting one foot in front of the other, because we're in new territory here. But the next eclipse in this eclipse season is a solar eclipse, and it's also a new moon in the sign of Libra. So, a solar eclipse is when a new moon is close to the nodes of the moon. If you're asking what is a node, that is a very good question, because if you look out into the sky and you're looking for these nodes, they're not there because they're a calculation point. It's basically math. So, they're not something that you can see in the sky. But when the nodes of the moon are very close to a full moon or a new moon, that's when we have eclipses. So if we look at the lunar eclipse that we had in Pisces and then the solar eclipse that we're going to have in Libra, these eclipses tell a story. So of course, we are dealing with sort of this disruption of our reality that happened with this Pisces eclipse. And now, as we're moving towards the solar eclipse in Libra, this is going to reveal more where things have been out of balance. So let me first talk about what this eclipse means for the collective, for every human being on this planet. So obviously, if you look at the news right now, we're seeing an escalation in the Middle East. Things have been very out of balance, very unjust. We have one country and other countries that are supporting this country, arming this country, inflicting genocide and violence on multiple populations, and nothing is really being done by a lot of the existing powers that be in the West. So by the time this eclipse happens, we'll be days away from a year of the escalation in Palestine. And if you remember, we had a solar eclipse in Libra on October 14th of 2023. So think about how much has happened between that last solar eclipse in Libra and the one that we're coming up to on October 2nd of 2024. There will continue to be a lot of attention on this issue, on how messed up things are, on how unjust they are, and how much failure around stopping this has happened. So, of course, with it being in the sign of Libra, this eclipse is very much going to be about justice and cooperation, particularly around this issue, because I think it is one of the biggest injustices that we're facing collectively right now. So, of course, it's going to be a hot topic, and I think it's going to continue escalating until some major moves happen. And of course, it's Libra season right now, and Libra is the sign of diplomacy. And I'm sure behind the scenes, there's a lot of attempts at diplomacy happening. But at the same time, the United States seems very unwilling to go up against their ally, Israel. And they've been kind of speaking out of both sides of their mouths while we continue to arm Israel. So with this eclipse, there is the possibility that we will have some forward movement on this issue, or something, an event of some kind that brings more forward movement on this issue, especially if we, the people, continue taking direct action and holding the powers that be accountable, because of course it takes two to tango. So when we're looking at the sign of Libra, it's not just, oh, the people in charge are making these decisions. It's also, what is our relationship with the people in charge? What is the social contract that we're engaged in right? That these people are allowed to make decisions on our behalf, and decisions that are causing harm to enormous amounts of people. So on a collective level with this eclipse, I think we'll be very much reviewing the past year in relationship to justice, where we individually have fallen short, where we collectively fallen short, because we surely have. The death toll is absolutely astounding, and it's surely an undercount based on a lot of the information that I've seen and a lot of studies that are being done. So on a collective level with this eclipse, I can very much see us discussing, thinking about, talking about what exactly has gone wrong here, where we've fallen short, where justice has really failed. And I'm sure that we will continue to see protests and direct action around this eclipse, and particularly around this issue. And I think that a lot of us, especially those of us who still have access to our feelings, are going to be reevaluating what exactly has led us to this moment and how justice has failed so miserably, right? Because justice is not something that can truly be had when it only applies to some people, right? So we have decided that an entire population of people, it's not worth saving their lives. And, is it justice? Is it justice for an entire population to be genocided, to be exterminated, to be threatened? So on a collective level, I think that we're really going to be facing the reality of what justice looks like. Because if we just apply justice to some people, to certain issues, is that really justice? Is it really justice if it just applies to people that the system was built for? I would say no. Is justice really justice if it only applies to certain people? I don't think so. And I don't think that many people think so. So I think those of us who are still in touch with our emotions, our empathy, are really going to be bringing some things into focus. And honestly, where the collective has fallen short on demanding justice for this issue and so many others. And of course, we are all a part of the collective, right? There are very few people among us that can, pick up the phone and stop something like a genocide, right? Unless you are a diplomat or the president of the United States, that's going to be very challenging to do. So we're going to have to ask ourselves some tough questions about what justice would actually look like. Like, what would it mean to live in a world where justice was something that we could count on, instead of something that was only owed to certain people? And I also see us reflecting on the fact that because so many of our systems are unjust, and because justice has been denied to so many marginalized groups of people, I think that we, the people, are going to have to stand up and demand justice that our systems are not interested in providing, right? Because justice is something that should be a collective experience. Because if that bad, horrifying thing can happen to those people over there, what's to say that it can't happen to you? And I think that if we really truly honestly reflect on that question, it's pretty easy to see that if justice doesn't apply to everyone, does it really exist at all? And so those are some of the collective themes I see for this particular eclipse. And following that Pisces eclipse, we may have had some of these issues being stirred up, because a lot of us are raised in societies and cultures and communities where the individual is really put above everyone else. And Pisces teaches us that actually it's all connected. It's all connected. So just because a tree falls in Palestine doesn't mean that you are not impacted or implicated in some way. So through this eclipse season, I'm seeing a lot of reflection on what it means to connect with yourself, with other people, with your spiritual understanding, because a lot of injustice comes from disconnection with ourselves and what we value, what we feel, disconnection with the people around us, disconnection from what we value, and disconnection from our sense of justice, what is right and what is wrong, and how we want to apply that to the future that we're all collectively moving towards. And that movement happens whether we're conscious of it or not. Because again, we are all part of this collective. And so I feel that this eclipse season is really bringing that all to the forefront and is something that we should really be hearing and paying attention to, what it's bringing up in our bodies, the ideas that it's bringing up in our minds, and the questions that we're going to have to answer for ourselves and decide how we want to move forward with this Libra eclipse. Let's talk about how this eclipse in Libra applies to you. Change in 2024 is palpable, right? You can feel it. You can feel it. And we are all part of that change, just the way that we are all part of this collective, whether we want to be in this moment or not. The truth is, we are. And each of us can get tossed around by the change because there is so much happening and it's a lot to keep up with. And for those of us who are conscious beings, it's a lot to feel through and process. So it's very easy for us to just be pushed around by what's going on and feeling like we're helpless and we just have to kind of tread water and get through the moment. That's one way to approach all of this change that we're dealing with. But the other option is that we can think about how we want to work with the change, how we want to harness it to move beyond whatever has limited us in the past, particularly old emotional patterns, right? Because oftentimes our emotional reactions are shaped by things that happen to us really early on in life, and they may not necessarily be appropriate to continue practicing as we move forward because, we might not want to live in that consciousness for the rest of our lives. Some of us do, some of us don't. And so there may be some conflict there because a lot of change is happening, and that causes a lot of us to cling to the things that are familiar, the things that feel safe, the things that feel known, rather than taking a risk that this change might make things worse for us. And the reality is that I believe that each and every one of us can work with this change to our benefit. And so clinging to the past and the things that are familiar may actually be holding us back. So my recommendation for this eclipse on a personal level is to assume that you benefit from change. So assume you benefit from change and make your moves from that space. Because if you decide that this change is going to be bad for you, you're already entering into the situation with your fist balled up and tension in your body. And guess what? You're probably going to attract more of that to yourself if that's the kind of thinking that you want to feed. So this eclipse in Libra is, of course, a new moon. And new moons are always a time for planting seeds and being deliberate with your energy. And I like to do something called setting intentions, which just means being very deliberate with your energy, deciding how you intend to use the energy of this particular new moon in your life. So you want to set intentions for how you want to work with the change that is coming from this eclipse. So the thing about eclipses is that the volume is really turned up on this energy. So it's even more impactful than just like our regular old Libra new moon. So we want to be very intentional with how we want to work with this change. And the best way to approach this is to assume that big change in how you want to move in the world and how you want to interact with others is actually possible. Because inviting the possibility in is step one. If you don't even think something is possible, then you probably won't put any energy into it or pursue it at all, and you won't really be signaling to the universe that it's something that you want, right? You're telling the universe that it's impossible. The chances of it actually coming through for you with that type of mindset, with that type of energy, are pretty low. So assuming that the change is possible is very important. And then you want to be intentional with how you want to use your energy, the energy that you have day to day, right? It's limited to some capacity. So where are you putting your energy? What in life are you cooperating with? Because Libra is a sign that is very much about cooperation. So what are you cooperating with? what are you giving your energy to? Because having that awareness is going to allow you to see where things are out of balance and where things are not necessarily reflecting the change that you want to embrace and move towards with this eclipse. Libra energy tends to notice everything and calculate accordingly. It's a very sensitive sign in that way. It's always taking in information and adjusting. So it really starts with noticing as we lead up to this solar eclipse. So just noticing where your energy is going. What kind of energy are you putting out in the world? What kind of energy are you cooperating with? What energy are you inviting to be on your team? Like what, where is there energy that you're kind of co-piloting with that is kind of right there with you as you move through life day to day? If you haven't paid attention to what it is that you're carrying around with you, this is a really great time to do some of that reflecting. We are all working with something, whether it's conscious or not. So awareness about what we're inviting in is going to be a really important part of this process. If everything is a mess or the worst ever, or the world has your back up against a wall, you are aligning yourself with that by thinking that way. You're being an ally to your own failure, potentially. So if you don't want to do that, think about what you are allying yourself with. So to really make magic with this eclipse, you want to align yourself with feelings that empower you and with people and issues that feel just to you, right? So if something is feeling imbalanced, if it doesn't feel fair to you, that might be a signal to you that it's time to intend something different than that. You want to set intentions for how you commit yourself to the things in your life that are important to you, to the people that you're close to the people that you work with, the people around you that you're not close to, that you share space and community with. What do you want to get out of all of those commitments? Are you being fair within those commitments? Because of course, if you're committing to anything or anyone, all you can control is your piece of the pie. So how do you want to show up for those commitments? And what are you committing to? That's also very important. If you are like, I am in this really close relationship and I don't even really understand like what we're doing here, it's probably time to get some clarity around that situation, because an important part of commitment is understanding what page we're on together, right? What are we doing here? So deciding how you want to show up, what your capacity is for any given relationship or situation, and also how you want your actions to impact those around you. Again, we can't control how people receive us or react to us, but we can be deliberate about our desired impact. We can have an intention when we go into certain situations or relationships. And with that, when you're setting intentions for what impact that you want to have, make sure that you think about the future that you're intending to call in with those actions. As I said, as a collective, we are dealing with the idea of justice in a very major way. And I think a lot of people are being woken up to how incredibly unjust our world is, but also how that injustice is the result of failed relationships and lack of communication and lack of fairness in the world in general, right? Because there's a lot of abuse and exploitation happening. And so what do we do in light of all of that information? Well, we can take account of what things look like in our corner of the world, how those injustices play out in our own lives and the lives of people around us. So we can be very intentional with the impact that we want to have, and also very intentional about what kinds of things we're looking to manifest in the future. So if you want to invite more justice into the world, you might look around at the life that you're living and the lives of people around you, people within your community, or just in your neighborhood. Are there injustices there that you can be a part of the solution of? Is there a way to ensure greater equity and fairness in your own life, in your own corner of the world? None of us are individually responsible for fixing all of the things that we're dealing with as a collective. It's going to be a group project, but what's important is understanding your role within that group project and being very intentional with how you use the limited energy that you do have. I think one of the most beautiful things about Libra energy is that it understands connectivity. So just because something is happening to someone else doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on us, that it doesn't imbalance us in some way. I think one of the most beautiful things about Libra energy is it can often understand that just because something isn't happening directly to them doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on them. So just because injustice is happening on the other side of the world, it doesn't mean that we're safe. And at the higher level, I think that Libra energy understands that an injustice done to one of us is really an injustice to us all. So we want to really be intentional about exactly how we're going to align with justice and what that really means to us, like really looking within to understand where our sense of justice is. And if we're somebody that can kind of write off injustices that are happening to other people, why is that? Why do you think it doesn't affect you? And really dig into that, because you'll find that it's not so simple as it didn't happen to me, therefore it can never happen to me or anyone that I care about. Another thing that we might want to look at as we set our intentions is the ways that avoiding conflict can actually create more injustice and imbalance. Because a lot of us don't like conflict. We don't like having to come head to head with somebody and voice our case and try to get them to care about something that we care about. And we're also living in a moment where people tend to avoid conversations with people that they think might not understand them right off the bat. And that might be one of the reasons why many people have avoided being involved in any social justice movements up until this point. So it's important to reflect on the ways that avoiding situations and avoiding discomfort is actually creating more imbalance and injustice for us. And the thing about Libra energy is it's not that it can't do conflict. It absolutely can do conflict. It absolutely can mediate and find compromises. But the thing about it is that it really has to be worth it. So if there's an issue that is really firing you up, that's probably a good sign that it relates to your perception of justice in some way. And there's so much injustice in our lives and in the world that there's about a million ways to approach it and get involved. So there really is something for everyone. And then the other thing that you want to think about as you set intentions is that it is important to take action. And it's important to be involved, especially for the things that light you up. Libra energy understands the value of cooperation. So it can be very overwhelming when we start looking at injustices in our own lives and the world around us. But the thing that's important to remember is that it's not on any individual's shoulders. This is a collective issue. And so being cooperative, learning how to work with other people, other groups of people on causes that are important to you is essential as we move forward. And when we work in cooperation with other people, we can have an even bigger impact. And when we learn how to cooperate with people on a one-on-one level or on a group level, that's when we see really major impacts. And that's what creates social change. So inviting more cooperation and fairness and balance into our individual lives will have a massive impact on the collective, especially if we all do it. So being very intentional about how we align our energy within, with other people, with groups that we work with, and with causes that we care about is the essential message of this eclipse in Libra. This eclipse is a very powerful reset where we can let go of some of those old habits that are preventing us from partnering with other people and being collaborative, aligned individuals. This eclipse is really giving us a chance to let go of some of those old emotional protective habits that we might have formed and instead commit to cooperating, to aligning with justice. Just because we've always done something a certain way doesn't mean that we have to continue doing things that way. And just because we've had bad experiences with different people or different groups in the past doesn't mean that that's always doomed to repeat. And this is a time to set new intentions about how you want to approach those things, how you want to show up and be a cooperative component to the future that you want to create. And that's where the real magic is possible, because each and every one of us are creative beings, and that impact can really be maximized when we align with people that we have something in common with as we do this work. The thing is that if we have been accepting injustices on a personal level, it makes it even easier to accept them on a social level. So there's a lot of reflecting, I think, that we have to do about how our individual lives impact people around us and vice versa, because this is another eclipse about connection and how we are inherently all connected. And part of that connection is reflected through the sign of Libra, how we come together, particularly in these one-on-one relationships, to affect change in our life, and how those one-on-one relationships ripple out into the collective. This eclipse season is a lot of energy, and I've talked about that as I've talked about Pluto in Capricorn and Mars in Cancer and all of the other stuff that we have going on this fall. As always, we want to make sure that we are taking care of our body, that we are engaging in our spiritual practices and staying connected to something larger than ourselves. That comes in really handy in a time where it's kind of hard to see too far ahead for a lot of us because so much is changing. And so these eclipses are an opportunity for us to get even more ready for the changes that we're walking into. 2024 has been a massive year of change, and 2025 is not going to let up on that front either. So there's a lot of skills that we need to practice, and there's a lot of things that we need to get very clear on. And this eclipse season is helping us do just that. It's shaking things up in a way so we can really make some adjustments that need to be made before we move forward. And a lot of times these adjustments feel so small in the grand scheme of things, but the reality is that a lot of the magic in our day-to-day lives is created through these little adjustments that we commit to over time. And there's a lot of magic to be had when we align with what's actually important to us, and we find other people that we can align with to have relationships, to understand ourselves and them better, to work on projects together, to make change together. So it's also very important to continue to stay connected, not only with your spiritual practices, but also with the people around you. Because as we get closer and closer to Pluto in Aquarius, it's going to be more and more important that we stay connected, that we are involved in community, that we have people that we support and who support us in return. Because there's a lot of injustice in the world, because there's a lot of change that needs to continue to happen. So there's a lot of magic in getting clear about what you want out of this change and being deliberate in how you're going to show up and be a cooperative part of making that change. This video is part of Petty Astrology podcast and brought to you by my sponsors over on Patreon. If you'd like more astrology, head over to patreon.com/Kaycee Felton-Lui.